Hey guys, Jason Flanagan here with Finish Strong Training, downtown Myrtle Beach. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss RDL, Romanian deadlift, the proper technique, the most common improper technique, and how to build strong hamstrings, glutes, and low back. So you approach the bar as if you are doing a deadlift, because if you are starting from the floor, you do have to deadlift it first. And whether it is 40% or 80% of your deadlift, you have to approach it like it is a max so we do not get injured. When we go down, we grab the bar in a neutral position, stacking the wrist on top, deadlift the bar up. Now I'm going to stick my chest out, pull my air in, and then you'll notice I stack my sternum down because I am bracing on top of a neutral spine, where if I keep my chest out, that will be a hyperextended spine and promote pulling rather than stretching the hamstring. So each rep, as I take the air in, I stack down on top of the stomach into the belt and then break the hips down. All right, so let's discuss the grip of the bar. So we can't just grab the bar and start RDLing, because if we have a set of 20, we do not want grip becoming a determining factor, causing bad technique or lack of reps that are in potential in reserve. So when we go to grip the bar, it should be just about our normal deadlift grip. So wherever you grab, generally it's going to be outside your hip or inside if we are doing any kind of sumo. So your normal grip, but it's not as simple as grabbing. Most people cup, and then the first move is the bar rolls down to the fingers. So make sure that we are stacking in between the index and thumb with a neutral wrist. Then we dig the hand down, then wrap, so we have as much coverage of the bar as possible. That way, when we go do and lift off the ground, there is zero rollout because our wrist is already in a neutral position. So when we're talking hip hinge, there is a few different things we need to address. So even without any weight, right? We set up with our proper footing that we will most likely always RDL in. And then after we take our air in, most likely if we're weighted, we are going to brace. We're going to break the hips first. Now with an RDL, there is a slight bend in the knees, and we are attempting to push our butt back as far as we can while maintaining toe pressure into the ground. So we don't want to be heel heavy falling off. Now a good way to figure that out is backing all the way up to a bench. It's already going to promote a soft lockout in the knees to begin with. Air, stack down into your neutral spine, and then start pushing those hips back as far as you can. And then notice as you go down, there is a knee hinge, and that is as far of a knee hinge as you need. And I am just continuing to break at the hips without letting my spine pass through that neutral position. So as you approach the bar, you're going to deadlift it as usual. Stand it up. As we discussed earlier, the chest is out. Take the air in and stack down on top of your neutral spine. Then you break at the hips first, taking it as far as possible without allowing your back to round. Now you're going to take that air in, stack down, break the hips with a soft lock in the knees, promoting the stretch in the hamstring. And the moment you do not feel it in the hamstring anymore, that is far enough. So when we refer to the glute drive within the RDL, it is extremely hard to activate the glutes in a fully stretched state, referring to below the knee with the bar or dumbbell or weight in hand. As soon as you start pulling the bar up and it gets above the knee, that is your sign to start driving your hips as hard as you can through full extension, but not into hyperextension. So going into that vertical lift, squeezing your glutes into the bar and not releasing your glutes until you break the hips down into that next rep. So now we're going to go through some common mistakes and improper form of the RDL. All right, so we're going to discuss some of the first common mistakes of the RDL, and that is rounding your back. Now there's two different rounding of your backs, whether you know it or not. Most people refer to the low back, but there is also upper back rounding. So first we're going to discuss the low back, which is what you probably think of as you round your back. If you start going down with the weight and you get to a certain point, and our low back turns into an S, and we no longer feel it in our hamstrings. It is either too much weight or you're not bracing properly. So you either need to start with a smaller range of motion, and we need to figure out how to brace, whether that be with a belt or lighter weight, until you feel confident enough to start trying it into a larger range of motion. The second rounding of the back is the upper back. It's actually not a mistake if you brace correctly. Now, what I mean by that is I'm braced and stacked, and now I'm gonna let my shoulder blades go, and it looks as if my upper back is rounded, which it slightly is. I'm just releasing my shoulder blades for a larger stretch down through the hamstrings. Now, that can also be a mistake if I don't brace. Now you can see that round has moved into the middle of my back and off of my hamstrings. All right, so the second mistake we're gonna discuss is knee bend. How much knee bend? Is there too much knee bend or not enough knee bend? So a big mistake is not knowing what an RDL is. Is it a deadlift, Romanian deadlift, or a stiff leg deadlift? They're all three different. Deadlift, we bend the knees, which usually is your first rep of an RDL anyway to get it off of the floor. Second is stiff leg deadlift. That is different from an RDL. That is where you actually start from the floor no matter what, and your knees are basically locked out going into a hip hinge to pull from there. Now an RDL, knee bend, how we discussed earlier with the bench, is going to be a soft lock, and they really should not bend anymore. However, you can bend or not bend as much as you need to make sure that you have all your feeling through the hamstrings. Now, myself, I like going down past the knees, driving my hips back. Once I get past the knees, I'm thinking I'm pulling my knees back the entire time down once I go past my knees, which will increase the stretch in the hamstring, and they're not gonna lock out anyway once you're in that position. All right, so the third common mistake that we see a lot is the bar drifting off of the body. Half of that has to do with your initial setup, and half of that has to do with your setup when you are fully extended with the weight. So just like a deadlift, because you have to deadlift it up anyway, you need to start super close to the bar. One that'll already promote you to bend your knees a little bit more and take it off of your back. And then from here, if the bar you notice is getting off of your body, that means you are bending over and you are most likely toe heavy. You have no choice but to let the bar drift out in front of you, which means you are not breaking your hips backwards. You should think about the bar almost riding down your shins and the top of your thighs the entire time. A comment that we hear a lot is within the RDL, people are not feeling it in their hamstrings. Generally, that means we're not hinging properly. We're not loading backwards. So a really good quick fix to that is finding a barbell on a rack, and you approach it. Now, I'm doing this for demo reasons, but really you would always face the rack away from the clips. But you walk all the way up to the bar, get into a good neutral spine, and now reach down and try to put the plate back towards your heels. Now I'm still in a neutral spine. Even if this is as far down as I can go, there is no position within here that you cannot feel it within your hamstrings, and it'll teach you to keep driving your hips backwards. All right, guys, so that's a wrap. So let's take some key takeaways from what we learned today. The setup, make sure it is super tight to the shins, whether we're deadlifting, RDLing, or stiff leg deadlifts. As you're up top, make sure that we're stacking all that air that we just took in down on the sternum into the belt before we break our hips back as far as possible without manipulating anything to achieve more hamstring stretch. Like always, comment, ask questions below. We would love to answer them. Like, subscribe. We'll see you soon.